The morning began with the same tired sigh that had become a habit for Emma. Her alarm had gone off 15 minutes late. The kettle took forever to boil, and by the time the coffee was ready, the sky outside was already draped in that familiar London grey, the kind that feels heavy, almost personal. The city was awake, but not alive yet. Everything moved in a hush of umbrellas, bus engines, and hurried footsteps splashing through puddles left from the night's drizzle. Emma slung her satchel across her shoulder, locked the door, and began her short but frantic walk toward the station. She could already hear the train announcements echoing down the street. Her gloved hand clutched the takeaway cup as if it were a lifeline. The steam kissed her face, blurring her glasses slightly. She didn't bother to wipe them. There wasn't time. There was never time. Being late had become her unintentional morning ritual. As a graphic designer working at a small creative agency in Shoreditch, Emma was used to deadlines, client calls, and all-nighters. But mornings? Mornings were not her art form. She reached the entrance of the underground just as a new wave of commuters poured in. Everyone seemed half awake, wrapped in scarves and their own worlds. The escalator carried her down into the hum of station noise, the clatter of footsteps, the rustle of newspapers, the low murmur of tired voices. Inside the train, the air was warm, a little too warm. Condensation fogged the windows, turning the city outside into a watercolor blur. Emma squeezed into a corner near the door, one earbud dangling uselessly, the other completely dead. She tapped her phone, hoping for a miracle, but the music app stayed silent. Typical, she muttered under her breath. It wasn't a good start to the day, and the lack of music left her painfully aware of everything around her. A man typing rapidly on a laptop, a woman flipping through a novel, the soft screech of metal as the train curved through the tunnels. She took a sip of coffee, now lukewarm, and tried to remind herself. Just another morning, Emma. Just get to work. At the next stop, more passengers piled in. The crowd shifted, pressed closer, shoulders brushing. Emma moved to make space, turning slightly, and that's when it happened. Her boot caught on something. Or rather, someone. The cup wobbled dangerously in her hand, and she let out a startled gasp as she nearly stumbled forward. A voice, warm and amused, broke through the noise.
Whoa, careful there.
Emma looked up, and for a split second, everything around her seemed to still. The man standing before her was tall, maybe early 30s, with a scruffy beard that didn't quite hide his smile. His brown hair was slightly messy, like he'd run a hand through it one too many times. He wore a dark coat, camera bag slung across his chest, not the typical briefcase or a laptop bag you saw on morning commutes. I'm so sorry, Emma said, her cheeks flushing. I wasn't looking where I... It's fine, he said quickly, still smiling. Happens every Monday. She couldn't help it. She laughed, the tension melting instantly. It's Wednesday. Then I guess my week's running late too. For the first time that morning, Emma forgot about the time. Forgot about her coffee, her dead headphones, even the pressing crowd. There was something gentle in the way he looked at her, not flirtatious, not rushed, just present. They stood in silence for a moment, a comfortable one, the kind that only happens when two strangers accidentally share the same rhythm. When the train slowed at the next station, the overhead lights flickered, casting a soft glow over his face. Emma noticed a small camera charm hanging from his bag zipper, and curiosity sparked. A photographer, she guessed. Someone who saw beauty in ordinary moments, the kind she always tried to design but rarely experienced. The announcement broke the spell. Next stop, Oxford Circus. She turned slightly, trying to look casual, but her heart was unexpectedly light. He caught her glance and smiled again, that quiet, knowing smile that says I noticed too. As the train doors opened, a rush of cool air swept through. People pushed past them, the city resuming its noisy rhythm. Yet for Emma, something had shifted. It was still an ordinary morning in London, grey skies, cold coffee, late trains. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel ordinary anymore. Because sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks or fate's grand design. Sometimes, it begins with nothing more than a stumble, a smile, and a pair of kind eyes across a crowded train carriage. The train rattled on, carrying Emma and Daniel, still strangers, through the twisting veins of the city. Outside, London blurred past in shades of gray and gold, the morning light breaking through the clouds in careful slivers. Inside, life continued its quiet rhythm. The rustle of coats, the squeal of brakes, the faint buzz of someone's headphones. Emma tried to focus on her phone, scrolling aimlessly through messages, but her mind wasn't really there. She could still feel the warmth of that small, accidental exchange, the easy laughter, his calm voice, the way his eyes had smiled even before his lips did. She glanced up just once, trying to be subtle. He was standing a few feet away now, holding onto the rail, camera strap still hanging loosely across his chest. He caught her looking, and instead of looking away, he grinned. "Don't worry," he said. "No more tripping hazards ahead." Emma laughed softly. "I'll try to keep both feet on the floor this time." "You'd be surprised how many people I meet on trains because of accidents," he said. "Coffee spills, bag straps, missing earphones." He shrugged. "London's basically one big meet-cute waiting to happen." "Meet cute?" she echoed, amused. "You know, the kind of thing that happens in rom-coms. Two people bump into each other, spill coffee, argue for 2 minutes, and then somehow fall in love by the end of the week." Emma tilted her head, pretending to think. "So, you're saying this could be a movie scene?" He smiled. "If it is, you definitely have the better lighting." That caught her off guard. A light flush crept across her cheeks. She wasn't used to easy compliments. But there was something about the way he said it, soft, teasing, not rehearsed. "What about you?" she asked, changing the subject slightly. "You said you meet people on trains a lot. Photographer, I'm guessing?" He nodded, tapping the camera bag.
Yeah.
"Travel photography mostly. Landscapes, streets, people. The everyday stuff that tells stories. I was heading to a small exhibition in Camden today." "That sounds incredible," she said, genuinely intrigued. "You get to travel for work?" "Sometimes. Other times I'm just wandering London pretending it's new again." He chuckled. "It's funny. When you start looking at a city through a lens, you see things you've never noticed before." Emma smiled faintly. "I design things for a living, but I think I've stopped seeing them. You know what I mean? Everything's just deadlines and emails now." He looked at her for a moment, as if trying to frame her words into a picture. "Then maybe you need to look up more." "Look up?"
Yeah.
"Everyone's always looking down, at screens, at the floor, at timetables. But if you look up, at the skyline, the faces, even the clouds, London looks completely different." Emma met his eyes again. There it was, that same calm warmth. The kind of connection that doesn't ask for attention, it just exists. The train slowed with a soft screech. A voice echoed. "Next stop, King's Cross." The moment hung there, fragile and fleeting. "So, Emma," he said suddenly. She blinked. "Wait, I didn't tell you my name." He laughed. "You didn't, but your coffee cup did." She looked down. Her paper cup from the cafe had her name scribbled in messy black marker.
Right.
"Guess Starbucks just helped you cheat." "Guilty," he said, lifting his hands. "Daniel, by the way." "Nice to officially meet you, Daniel." They shook hands briefly, and somehow that tiny gesture felt far more personal than it should have. When the train came to a halt, the doors slid open with a whoosh of cold air. Passengers began to shuffle out, and Daniel slung his camera bag over his shoulder. "This is me," he said, nodding toward the door. "Camden's waiting." Emma hesitated, wanting to say something, anything, to make the moment last. "Good luck with the exhibition." "Thanks," he said, then paused. "And try not to trip over anyone else today." "I'll do my best," she smiled. The doors closed, and she watched as he disappeared into the crowd on the platform. The train moved again, leaving only the faint echo of his laughter and the soft scent of his cologne in the air. Emma sat quietly, heart still fluttering. Not dramatically, just gently. The kind of flutter that hints at something beginning. Maybe he was right. Maybe London was full of meet-cuties. But this one felt different. Because sometimes the most unexpected meetings are the ones that change everything. For the next few days, Emma couldn't stop thinking about him. Daniel. The name rolled in her mind like a quiet song she couldn't forget. She told herself it was silly. He was just a stranger she met on the tube. A kind smile, a warm laugh, a few clever words. That's all. But somehow, the memory stayed, like sunlight slipping through blinds, faint but impossible to ignore. Each morning, she found herself scanning faces on the platform, wondering if she'd see him again. Every time a camera strap swung past, her heart skipped. But it was never him. She hated that part. The almost. The weeks stretched on, long meetings, endless client revisions, gray skies pressing down. The world felt ordinary again, and she missed that unexpected spark that had briefly made London feel alive. It was Sunday when fate decided to play its hand. Emma had planned to spend the day doing nothing, just coffee, laundry, and maybe a movie. But the rain began early, tapping gently on her window, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she wanted to go out. She grabbed her umbrella, wrapped herself in her favorite scarf, and wandered toward Notting Hill, her quiet escape whenever she needed to breathe. The streets were soft with rain, the pavements glistening like glass. Cafes buzzed with the smell of coffee and cinnamon. She stopped in front of her favorite little bookshop, a narrow corner store that smelled of old paper and stories. It was her secret place, the kind of spot where time seemed to pause. She pushed open the creaky door, and the soft bell above it chimed gently. Inside, the world felt warm. A record played faint jazz in the background, and the owner, Mr. Henson, gave her his usual nod of recognition before returning to stacking books. Emma smiled, brushing raindrops from her coat. She wandered through the aisles, fingers tracing the spines, poetry, travel, art. She turned a corner toward the photography section and froze. There he was, Daniel, standing near the window, camera in hand, capturing the way raindrops streaked down the glass. The gray light outside framed him perfectly, a quiet silhouette in motion, eyes focused, lost in his own world. Emma's breath caught. For a moment, she just watched him, the way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration, the soft click of his camera, the hint of a smile as he looked at the result. He hadn't seen her yet. She could walk away, pretend it never happened, save herself from the awkward, "Oh, fancy seeing you here."
But something inside her said stay.
She took a slow step forward. "Trying to capture the rain?" she asked, voice soft, almost uncertain. Daniel turned. Surprise lit his face, then recognition, followed by that familiar grin. "Emma," he said, as if saying her name out loud confirmed she was real. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I could say the same," she smiled. "You stalking me through bookshops now?" "Only the good ones," he said, laughing. "I come here sometimes. The light through that window, it's perfect when it rains." She glanced outside. "You weren't kidding. It's like the city paints for you." They stood side by side near the window, the soft patter of rain their background music. He showed her the photo on his camera, a simple shot of raindrops clinging to glass, the blurred reflection of the street beyond. It was ordinary yet beautiful. "I love how you see things," she said quietly. "Most people would just see rain." He looked at her then, really looked. "Maybe you just need to look closer." Their eyes held, and for a heartbeat, the whole shop seemed to disappear, just them, framed in that perfect light, the world outside blurring away. They spent the next hour talking, wandering through shelves, exchanging thoughts on books and travel, and how everyone in London pretends not to care about the weather. The conversation felt easy, familiar, like continuing something that had started long before. When they finally stepped back outside, the rain had stopped. The street smelled fresh, washed clean. Daniel turned to her. "Coffee." She smiled. "Only if you promise not to make me trip again." He laughed.
"Deal."
As they walked side by side toward the cafe at the corner, Emma couldn't help but feel it, that quiet certainty that something beautiful had just found its way back to her. Because sometimes, fate doesn't knock loudly. Sometimes, it just leaves the door open and waits for you to walk back in. The cafe at the corner was one of those places that felt like a secret, tiny round tables, fogged windows, and the comforting hum of rain outside. Emma and Daniel slid into a booth by the window, the world beyond it blurred by droplets that raced each other down the glass. For a few minutes, they said nothing. Just the soft clinking of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, the muffled rhythm of the storm. It wasn't awkward silence, it was the kind that feels safe, the kind that lets two people breathe in the same moment without needing to fill it. Daniel stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, then looked up. "So, Miss Designer," he said lightly, "what do you see when you look at rain?" Emma raised a brow. "That's a very photographer question." "Maybe," he grinned. "But humor me." She thought for a moment. "Honestly, I used to hate it. Rain means delays, frizzy hair, and canceled plans. But lately, I don't know. It feels quieter. Like the city slows down just enough to think." Daniel nodded. "That's why I love photographing it. People see inconvenience. I see reflection. There's beauty in the stillness it brings." "You make everything sound poetic," she teased. "Occupational hazard," he said with a laugh. "You learn to find stories in small things." Emma smiled, watching the way his fingers curled around his cup, steady and sure. "So, what's your story then?" "The man who wanders cities and photographs strangers." He leaned back, thinking. My dad was a journalist. Traveled constantly. I used to follow him with this little disposable camera, taking pictures while he worked. After he passed away, I guess that just stuck. Taking photos felt like keeping him close. Emma's expression softened. That's beautiful. Yeah, he said quietly. He used to tell me, the world's not waiting to be perfect before you capture it. It's messy, unpredictable. But that's the point. Emma's expression softened. That's beautiful. Yeah, he said quietly. He used to tell me, the world's not waiting to be perfect before you capture it. It's messy, unpredictable. But that's the point. She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, she understood something. Daniel didn't just take photos, he felt them. Every image was a memory, a heartbeat. What about you? He asked gently. Why design? She hesitated. I used to draw when I was little. I'd make these fake posters for imaginary movies. My mom would hang them on the fridge like they were masterpieces. She laughed softly. It just made me happy. Turning ideas into something real. But somewhere between clients and deadlines, I think I lost a bit of that magic. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but certain. You'll find it again. You just need to look for it where you're not expecting it. His words lingered between them, as soft and sincere as the rain outside. An hour passed, then another. Neither seemed to notice. They talked about everything, favorite films, terrible music from their teens, dream destinations. Emma learned that Daniel hated planes but loved airports, that he collected postcards he never sent, that he once photographed the same sunrise for a month just to see how the light changed. In return, he learned that Emma had a habit of doodling in margins, that she judged people by their tea choices, and that she secretly believed every person had a color, a shade that described their energy. So what's mine? He asked, amused. She studied him, pretending to think. Deep amber.
Warm.
A little unpredictable, like sunset through glass. He chuckled. I'll take that. Outside, the rain had eased into a drizzle. The cafe windows glowed golden against the dim street, and the city seemed to hum softly around them. When they finally stepped outside, Daniel held the door open for her. Still raining, he said, glancing at the clouds. London doesn't do sunshine on demand, she smiled. He opened his umbrella, tilting it slightly so she could step beneath it. Their shoulders brushed, a small, electric moment, and Emma felt that quiet thrill again, the one she couldn't quite name. They walked slowly, sharing stories between the sound of raindrops. Somewhere along the way, laughter turned into silence, the comfortable kind that says more than words ever could. At the corner where their paths would part, Daniel turned to her. Same time tomorrow? He asked, almost shyly. Emma hesitated, then smiled. Maybe. If the rain's right.
He grinned.
I'll bring the umbrella, just in case. As he walked away, she stood for a moment under the soft drizzle, watching him fade into the rhythm of the city. The air smelled of rain and roasted coffee, of beginnings and promises. And somewhere deep inside, she knew this was no ordinary conversation in the rain. It was the start of something that would change both of their worlds. The days that followed felt like something out of a quiet dream. Emma and Daniel saw each other often, unplanned at first, then on purpose. Morning coffees turned into long walks along the Thames. Evening talks stretched until the city lights blurred into stars. They discovered new corners of London together. Little cafes tucked behind flower stalls, hidden rooftops that offered secret views of the skyline. Everything about it felt effortless, natural. And that was what made it harder when he told her he had to leave. They were sitting on a park bench one Sunday afternoon, golden leaves scattered at their feet. Daniel's voice was calm, but his eyes were unsure. I got an offer, he said quietly. A photography project, 2 months across Europe. It's everything I've been working toward. Emma tried to smile, even as her heart clenched. That's amazing. He hesitated. Yeah, but... She finished for him. But it means leaving. He nodded. The silence that followed wasn't angry or bitter. It was heavy with unspoken things. Hope, fear, what-ifs. Emma wanted to tell him not to go. To stay. To choose her. But she couldn't. Because if she loved anything about Daniel, it was his need to see the world, to capture it, to live it. When do you leave? She asked finally. Next Friday. She nodded. Then we've got a week. He looked at her, eyes soft. A week's not long.
No, she said.
But it's enough to make memories. That week became a collection of snapshots. Not just for Daniel, but for Emma too. A blurry photo of them laughing under a shared umbrella. A train ticket from Brighton where they'd spent a chilly afternoon watching waves crash. A sketch she made of him at her kitchen table, half distracted, half smiling. Each moment felt like it was being written into her skin, fleeting, but infinite. On their last evening together, they walked along the south bank. The city shimmered, reflecting off the river like a painting of light and movement. Daniel stopped, setting his camera down. "I keep trying to take a picture that feels like this," he said softly. "But nothing does." Emma looked at him, her chest tightening. "Then stop trying to capture it. Just live it." He smiled faintly, then took her hand. "That's probably the best advice anyone's ever given me." They stood there in silence, fingers intertwined, the world rushing quietly around them. The morning of his flight arrived too soon. The airport was loud, trolley wheels clattering, announcements echoing, goodbyes layered over goodbyes. Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her longer than he needed to. "I'll message you every day," he whispered. "You'd better," she said, trying to sound steady. He kissed her forehead. "I'll send you pieces of everywhere I go. Postcards. Pictures. The kind that don't make it to exhibitions." Emma smiled through the ache. "Then I'll be waiting." He looked at her one last time before disappearing past the gate. And then he was gone, swallowed by distance and departure boards. Days turned into weeks. Emma threw herself into work, into design projects that didn't mean much, but kept her hands busy. Yet every evening, her phone would light up with his name, and suddenly, the world felt smaller again. A picture of a quiet street in Paris. A sunrise in Venice. A train window view from the Swiss Alps. Each photo came with a message, a small story, a thought, a moment he wanted to share. And she replied with pieces of her own world. The rainy mornings, the empty cafes, the doodles she made between deadlines. It wasn't the same, but it was something. A thread stretched between two hearts, fragile but real. One night, while scrolling through his latest photo, a shot of a cobblestone street lit by warm lanterns, she realized something. Distance didn't always mean losing someone. Sometimes it was proof that the bond was strong enough to stretch, to bend, but not break. She closed her eyes, smiling softly at her screen. Across miles and cities, somewhere under a different sky, Daniel was probably smiling too. Because even apart, they were still walking the same road, just on different sides of the world. Winter had settled softly over London. The air carried that quiet chill that made everything slower, breaths visible, footsteps careful, the city wrapped in gray and gold. Emma sat by her window one evening, sketchbook open but untouched, tracing lines that meant nothing. It had been 2 months since Daniel left, 63 days, to be exact. She knew because she'd counted. He'd kept his promise. Messages every day, photos that made her heart ache in the best way. Sunrises in Florence, reflections on a frozen lake in Prague, a black and white portrait of an old man in a cafe somewhere in Vienna. Each image felt like a love letter, written in light instead of ink. But for the last 3 days, silence. No messages. No photos. Just empty screens and restless thoughts. She tried not to worry, telling herself he was probably busy, traveling, working. Still, the quiet hurt in a way she couldn't quite explain. Friday came, gray and cold as most London Fridays are. Emma left work early, wandering aimlessly through Notting Hill, her feet carrying her to the bookshop without even thinking. The bell above the door chimed its familiar note as she stepped inside. Warmth greeted her, along with the comforting scent of paper and rain. Mr. Henson looked up and smiled. "Evening, Emma. Escaping the weather again?" She smiled faintly. Something like that. She wandered through the aisles, running her fingers along the books, her heart quietly heavy. The shop had become a kind of refuge, the one place that felt like them. Her eyes drifted toward the window, the same window where she had first found Daniel months ago, camera in hand. Now, only the reflection of rain remained. She sighed softly. "You really got under my skin, didn't you?" she whispered to herself. "Sorry about that." The voice, warm, familiar, unmistakable, came from behind her. Emma froze. Slowly she turned. There he was, Daniel, standing by the same shelf, camera bag slung over his shoulder, hair damp from the rain. His eyes met hers, tired but bright, and in that moment, the whole world seemed to stop breathing. "Hi," he said softly. For a second, she couldn't move. Then, the The disbelief broke into a laugh that was half relief, half joy. You're here. I'm here. He took a step closer. I wanted to surprise you. Didn't mean to go quiet. Lost my phone in Venice. Spent 3 days trying to track down my photos. Emma shook her head, laughing again as tears gathered in her eyes. You could have just sent a pigeon or something. Next time, he said, smiling. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's warmth but still apart, the silence between them electric and alive. So, she managed, her voice trembling slightly. How was Europe? Beautiful, he said simply. But it wasn't London. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope, slightly crumpled from travel. I was going to send this, but I figured I'd rather deliver it in person. Inside was a photograph, a shot of a narrow street somewhere in Italy. In the center of the frame stood a woman in a yellow coat, her back to the camera, umbrella tilted against the rain. Emma stared at it. That's me. Daniel nodded. Took it the day before I left. I wanted to remember the way you looked when you weren't trying to pose. Just real. Her voice softened. You're impossible, you know that? He smiled gently. You said once that rain makes the city slow down. I figure it gave me time to catch up to you. For a moment, they just stood there. The hum of rain against glass, the faint music playing somewhere in the shop, and the quiet, trembling joy of reunion. Then she stepped forward and hugged him, the kind of hug that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that finds home. His arms wrapped around her instantly, and she could feel his heartbeat against hers. Steady, sure, real. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you more, he murmured into her hair. Outside, the rain kept falling, soft, constant, timeless. Inside, 2 paths that had drifted apart had finally found their way back to the same place. After that day in the bookshop, life didn't change suddenly. There were no fireworks, no sweeping declarations, no dramatic music. Just 2 people learning how to exist together again. Quietly, carefully, beautifully. Daniel moved into a small flat not far from Emma's. The kind with creaky floorboards and windows that let the morning light in like a secret. He joked that it was too small for all his camera gear, but she knew he loved it. It was home, because it was near her. Their days soon found a rhythm. Morning started with coffee, his black, hers sweet with too much sugar. They'd meet at her kitchen counter, half awake, passing each other spoons and sleepy smiles. Sometimes he'd snap a photo of her mid-sip, claiming it was for artistic purposes. She'd roll her eyes, pretending to be annoyed, but she secretly loved it, the way he saw beauty in her unguarded moments. Work filled their weekdays, but evenings belonged to them. They'd cook together, or at least try to. Daniel's culinary skills rarely matched his confidence, and Emma would laugh as he burned toast or confused salt for sugar. Their laughter filled the flat more than any decoration could. It wasn't perfect, it was real. On weekends, they wandered the city hand in hand. Sometimes they revisited their favorite haunts, the bookshop, the riverside cafes, the park bench that still held the ghost of their first goodbye. Other times, they found new places, hidden gardens, markets with street musicians, art galleries where they'd whisper observations to each other and pretend to be critics. Daniel started including Emma in his work. He'd photograph her sketching in cafes, lost in thought, unaware of the world. Those photos soon became part of a new project he was quietly putting together, a series he called Ordinary Magic. When she saw the collection one night, dozens of soft, candid photos of everyday life, her breath caught. Each picture told a story, her hands tangled in her hair, their reflections in puddles, sunlight hitting her face through a window. You make ordinary things look special, she said softly. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You are the special part. She didn't reply, just kissed him, slow, tender, full of all the words she didn't need to say aloud. There were quiet nights too, the kind that felt suspended in time. They'd curl up on the sofa under a blanket, watching old films or saying nothing at all. Sometimes Emma would fall asleep halfway through, and Daniel would pull the blanket tighter around her, pressing a small kiss to her forehead before turning off the lights. It wasn't a love built on excitement or drama. It was built on presence, on showing up every day in 1,000 small ways. He learned the sound of her laughter before her morning coffee. She learned the way his brow furrowed when he was editing photos late at night. They learned each other's rhythms, imperfect, steady, human. One evening, they stood by the window as the city lights shimmered below. Rain was falling again, gentle, familiar. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever miss traveling? She asked quietly. Daniel smiled.
Sometimes.
But I think I was always chasing something that felt like this. She turned to him. Like what?
Stillness, he said.
A reason to stop running. She smiled faintly. You found it. He looked at her, really looked, and nodded.
Yeah.
I think I did. Outside, London moved on, buses, footsteps, sirens, life. But inside that small flat, the world had slowed down to the rhythm of two hearts beating in quiet harmony. They didn't need words to know what they had. Because sometimes love isn't about the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It's about the mornings, the laughter, the burnt toast, the simple, ordinary days that somehow become everything. Spring came softly to London that year. The air felt lighter, the sky bluer, and even the rain seemed kinder. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt settled. Not stuck, rooted. She and Daniel had found their rhythm, a steady pulse between them that felt both ordinary and miraculous. And now, something new was blooming, for him and for them. Daniel's photo series, Ordinary Magic, had been chosen for a gallery exhibition in Soho. It was small, local, intimate, the kind of show that drew in strangers who loved stories told through light and silence. Emma had watched him prepare for weeks, printing, framing, adjusting, second-guessing. He wanted everything to be perfect, though she kept reminding him that the beauty of his work was its imperfection. You capture moments that don't even know they're beautiful, she told him one night. He'd smiled, quietly, the way he always did when her words landed somewhere deep. The evening of the exhibition arrived. The gallery glowed softly under the golden light of dusk. People moved slowly through the room, glasses of wine in hand, murmuring softly as they lingered in front of each photograph. Emma walked through the space, her heart swelling with quiet pride. Each image told a piece of their story, not just his or hers, but theirs. A shot of a coffee cup half full beside a sketchbook. A blurred photo of two silhouettes laughing on a bridge. Rain tracing lines down a window pane, reflections of two faces caught in the glass. And then, in the center of the room, one photograph stood alone. It was large, framed simply, beautifully. The image showed Emma sitting on a bench in the park, head turned slightly, sunlight catching her hair. There was something so unguarded about it. Peaceful, real, entirely her. Below it, a small plaque read, When Two Paths Crossed, 2024. She froze. The title hit her like a quiet wave. Daniel appeared beside her, his voice gentle. You said once that everything started with a gray morning on the tube. She looked at him, eyes soft. And you turned it into art. He smiled faintly. You turned it into home. As the night went on, people congratulated him, asked about his process, his inspiration. He spoke modestly, but every word somehow circled back to her, not in name, but in spirit. And each time their eyes met across the room, it felt like a silent conversation only they could hear. Later, when the gallery had emptied and the city had quieted, they walked hand in hand along the Thames. The water shimmered with reflections of streetlights and stars, the world around them humming softly. Do you ever think about that morning? She asked. On the train? All the time, he said. If you hadn't tripped over my shoes. She laughed. You'd still be chasing sunsets across Europe. And missing the best one right here, he replied. They stopped at the railing, the wind brushing past them. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, simple, understated, like everything else about him. Emma's breath caught. Daniel. He smiled nervously, opening it to reveal a silver ring, elegant and delicate. I didn't plan this for the gallery, or for a moment that needed an audience, he said quietly. I just wanted to ask you the same thing I've been asking since the day we met. She tilted her head, heart racing. And what's that? To stay, he whispered. Wherever I am. With me. Her eyes filled, but her voice was steady. I already have. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she leaned in, closing the space between them. A kiss under the London night, soft and infinite. Later, they stood in silence, watching the river move beneath them. The same city that had once made them strangers now held every piece of their story. Because love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or fate. Sometimes it begins with spilled coffee, tangled headphones, and a stranger's kind eyes on a gray morning. And if you're lucky, it stays.